But right now we're joined by the Mayor of Greater Manchester, Andy Burnham, who of course was Labour's Health Secretary from 2009 to 2010. Morning, you were there in London yesterday.
I was indeed.
Yep. What a day. Just talk us through what you felt when to be there.
Oh my goodness, it was genuinely overwhelming. Obviously, Janet, thousands of other people, like a collective weight was just lifted. Their faces, it was just quite moving actually to be there and to see what it meant. And Sir Brian had such a connection with people. You could probably see that from the footage. Really, he's done an outstanding job, a superb job. He's given a voice to a community that was just left completely in the wilderness, unforgivably, for decades.
You've said there are questions for all politicians to answer over this.
True.
How did everybody, including you, how did everybody get it wrong?
Well, everybody let the people affected down, all the political parties, and I think the Prime Minister and Keir Starmer recognised that and spoke very well in Parliament yesterday. It went back to the sort of 70s and 80s where, for fear of the financial exposure, I think the government just dug in behind a position that there was no liability.
Well, you think that's what it was about?
Yes,
money?
I do. I honestly do. And that was the line. It was like a cast iron line, no liability, don't admit it. And in my time as Health Secretary, people were campaigning at that time. And you might remember I'd worked on Hillsborough, and I got too late to it. But a friend of mine, Paul Goggins, an MP, said, look, really got to look at this. It's like Hillsborough, Andy. And so, as I say, it took me too long. But in 2017, I made my final speech to Parliament where I said what I believe to be the case, that it was a criminal cover-up on an industrial scale. And that is indeed what it is. And, by calling it what it is now, you hope that the families get as much as can be provided in terms of redress, but so much has been taken from them. They can't really have justice. You
say you came to it too late because you were Health Secretary right at the end of yes. the Gordon Brown era, weren't you, before the Conservatives then took over, so 2009, 2010. But a couple of years before that, there was an independent inquiry, wasn't there, which had raised serious questions and blamed successive governments. So it wasn't like the information wasn't there on your desk.
Well, no, it's true. But what happened was that was responded to. It was called the Archer inquiry before I arrived. I inherited the sort of anger at the government's response at the time. And then I met, at the request of Paul, I met campaigners. And I began to hear what they were telling me was that medical records had been destroyed, amended, and that's where the kind of the parallel with Hillsborough started to grow for me.
But you talk about Paul Goggins because he was calling for a public inquiry then, wasn't he? When you were Health Secretary.
He was saying to me that you've got to find the evidence because it is there. And as I say, it took too long. I'm not for a second.
Are you angry with yourself for not doing more when you were in that job?
Everybody looks back, don't they? I wish I could have done more quickly. I was very focused on Hillsborough at the time, but when that was completed, I turned my attention to blood. And I'd like to think that the speech I made a difference. But other people, Theresa May ordered the public inquiry, Diana Johnson. Nobody did what we should have done as quickly as we should have done. But the point is, here we are. I think two things I would say. We've got to fully face up to what happened. And, I heard what the Prime Minister said yesterday, but it really must be honoured. There's another big scandal out there, nuclear test veterans. If you're going to face up to the past, you've got to face up to injustice everywhere. And then looking to the future, we've just got a pattern here, haven't we? We've got Hillsborough, we've got Grenfell, we've got Post Office, we've got Windrush, we've got contaminated blood. As I've just said, one that's not been dealt with yet, nuclear test veterans. This is a pattern that keeps on repeating. I think the unelected state in Britain has too much power. It's too easy to cover up. Sir Brian was right yesterday to recommend a statutory duty of candour on senior civil servants. I would say it should be on all public servants. Tell the truth at the first time of asking. That's the only way we can break this pattern that keeps on repeating.
You have listed there a series of scandals. When you were Health Secretary, of course, you left government, government changed. What happens between you and the next person to hand all of this over? Does that happen? When you leave that job, do you say to the next person, you've got to look at this?
Well, yes, and in the case of Blood, I instigated and I reopened the financial compensation. And to be fair, Andrew Lansley, who was my successor, accepted that and made some steps in the right direction. And, you know, we do talk. You know, sometimes you realise as an MP, things move most when you work on a cross-party basis. And when it comes to issues like this, there is no politics. It's way above party politics. And in the end, cross-party efforts got us to this point. But the country should work more like this. It shouldn't be the exception. As I say, you know, there is a need actually for big change here. This report, I believe, has rocked Whitehall to its foundations. There is something very wrong with the way the British state handles these things. Huge change is needed here. And I call on all of my former colleagues in Parliament now to put politics aside, look at what's happened here, bring in a full, comprehensive Hillsborough law to start to kind of tip the scales of justice back towards ordinary people, rather than what has happened to the Hillsborough campaigners, the Blood campaigners, in the wilderness for years, shouting but nobody listening. You know, that has a re-traumatising effect on people who've been very deeply wronged in the first place.
Seeing some of the families here who are outside the report publication yesterday, we're going to get a sense in Parliament today of what the compensation package might look like, and it could run, we understand, to maybe about £10 billion, huge quantities of money. What are your thoughts on how that is then distributed and how quickly that can be done?
Well, it does need to be done as quickly as possible. Sadly, I think Janet just said, you know, people have died, haven't they, before this this day has come, which is so sad to realise that. But move very quickly. And this is the thing, isn't it? If the Treasury had opened up in the first instance, it wouldn't have had this huge cost now of putting things right now. But it just has to be done, and it has to be done quickly. But bigger lessons need to be learned, don't they, in terms of the way the state handles these things. And I just hope as well there is individual accountability. We could never achieve that for the Hillsborough families. We worked hard at it, but the passage of time meant it couldn't be delivered. In this instance, I think everything should be done to look at whether...
But even more time has passed in this case.
I know, but, you know, this cover-up was going on up until very, very recently. You could even say up until yesterday. And in the case of the Department for Health, an organisation that is responsible for people's health, they weren't honest about people's health, and that had health consequences. So I've said I think there is a case here for potentially corporate manslaughter. You know, the Department of Health not being honest with people about their health is a very serious matter indeed.
And how much of a difference would that make to the families?
It's that accountability, isn't it? You know, we go through these processes as a country, we finally get to the truth, but often we fall short of the accountability. And I think we're seeing an element of that with the Post Office at the moment. You know, accountability really matters, be that on an individual level or on a corporate level. And I hope, I asked the Prime Minister and Keir Starmer, they should work together on that to see if there is any further justice that can be achieved for the campaigns. And
put politics aside, because
completely.
That's what our viewers tell us on so many subjects every morning.
No one's got the moral high ground. As I said, everybody let them down. No one's got the moral high ground. The onus on politicians is to put everything aside and do everything possible to make recompense, but at the same time to change the way the country works. How many more times can we go through this pattern of events? The cycle has to be broken, and that's a Hillsborough law that we need, and we need it now.
Andy Burnham, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Thank you.